So this is the ENERMAX ETS-F40 FS A-RGB in black. And yes, it's not quite the easiest name to remember, but it is a cooler that I feel has a lot of potential to carve out a nice home for itself in this absolutely overcrowded market. And it's definitely not because it has hands down the best cooling performance for $50. I mean, it does have great cooling performance, and we'll talk about that more later on in this video, but it does something that I kind of lost sight of over the past few months. Completes like the entire picture. So this cooler comes in either black or white, is usable with basically all mainstream AMD and Intel sockets, has plenty of space for whatever memory kit you decide to use, and it's actually only 158 millimeters tall, so it should easily fit in most mid-tower or larger cases. At the top, we have a really nice looking plastic RGB top plate with the ENERMAX branding directly in the center. This top plate is powered by connecting it to the included 140 millimeter RGB fan, and yes, I did say 140 millimeter, not 120. This is obviously kind of unique for a cooler like this, and well, it's something I really liked because it helps decrease the noise output of the fan while also giving you that same cooling performance potential. Fan is well built and has rubber pads on each corner to help dampen vibration. It has two color matching cables extending from it, one to power the actual fan and the other to power the RGB via an A-RGB header on the motherboard. Unfortunately, this cooler doesn't include an RGB controller for those of you guys who don't have a motherboard with an A-RGB header. And yeah, it is kind of a bummer not to see that controller with this kit, but honestly, it's not as big of a deal as it used to be, as most new motherboards, including the budget ones, are starting to include A-RGB headers on them. Now, the fin array is very well put together, relatively dense, and the black coating on it is absolutely top notch. It's probably the best finish I've seen on a cooler to date. And moving to the bottom of the cooler, there's a very well machined cold plate, 4 double-sided copper heat pipes, as well as the mounting plate that utilizes a simple 2-screw mechanism to attach the cooler to the motherboard. Installation is very straightforward for both Intel and AMD platforms, and while none of the hardware is labeled strictly for either platform in the actual box, the included instructions manual does a great job outlining what to do. For AMD, remove the black retainers that come pre-installed on your motherboard, throw on the 4 spacers, and then screw down the AMD mounting plate. For Intel, install the screw and washer on the included backplate in accordance to whatever CPU socket you are using. Throw on the 4 spacers and then screw down the Intel retainers. Once that's done for either platform, the rest of the process is going to be the same. Add some thermal paste, remove the protective cover from the bottom of the CPU cooler, and then attach the heatsink to the CPU socket. Be sure to alternate between each screw until they are firmly attached to ensure proper mounting pressure. Now attach the 140 millimeter fan, connect the heatsink cable into the fan cable, and then plug in both the PWM and A-RGB cables into the motherboard. Overall, I really like the process of this, and it reminded me a lot of the tension bar found on the Be Quiet Shadow Rock 3, except this process was much better. Now, with that said, let's talk about cooling and noise performance. This is where my opinion of this cooler really concreted itself, and there is a lot to love here, even though it's not the absolute best air cooler I've personally tested when it comes to pure cooling performance. So I test all of my coolers on the 3900X clocked at 4.2 gigahertz, 1.25 volts, while it's sitting on the MSI B450 Tomahawk Max motherboard, and I test them all at max RPM, as well as noise normalized to 35 decibels. Now, the unrestricted test does follow my motherboard's default fan curve. This obviously provides a lot of uncontrollable variables in this test, such as like fan noise, and I like to use this test so that you guys have something to compare the noise normalized testing to, and it kind of gives you guys a good idea of how efficient a cooler's fan really is. So, in the unrestricted test, the ETS-F40 hangs with the best air coolers that I've tested thus far, coming in with a max temperature of 78 degrees Celsius and an average temperature of 69.9 degrees Celsius. This is also while only producing 38 decibels of noise in comparison to the Esports Duo's 42 decibels and the SE224 XT's 46 decibels. And I know this number, like the number variance, might not seem like a big difference when it comes to like actual decibels, but the decibel scale is logarithmic. So basically both of those coolers could be perceived as nearly double the noise output in comparison to the ETS-F40. ENERMAX ETS-F40. And that's pretty insane for just a few degrees better performance in this test. Now, this is kind of further displayed in my noise normalized testing, as there are 4 coolers that are basically within margin of error of each other. The ETS-F40 during this test had a max temperature of 79 degrees Celsius and an average temperature of 70.8 degrees Celsius. This is within a degree of the Esports Duo, the ShadowRock 3, and the SE224XT. And so why do I like that this cooler is so quiet when you can just tweak the fan curve of the SE224XT and the Esports Duo and basically get the same performance? Well, I could be wrong here, but I would say that the average user, most people, don't like messing around with their BIOS, and in turn don't like messing around with their fan curve. And you might not be one of them. You might be all for it. You might jump into your BIOS every single day. Who knows? But I know several people who will not touch their BIOS no matter what. Even if I tell them it's 100% safe, they will not go into it because it scares them. They are afraid of going into it. And I get it. You know, you spend all this money on a computer, you could damage it by going into your BIOS. So I think this cooler and coolers like this cooler, so like the ShadowRock 3, are attractive because they are legitimately plug and play for anyone, including those who are either more sensitive to noise or like their systems quieter, and they just don't want to jump into the BIOS to have to modify the fan curve or anything like that. Combine that with the fact that this cooler is super easy to install, it's also very high quality when it comes to how it's made, and it has some really, really nice RGB, which we didn't really talk about today, but again, it does have really nice RGB, and you have that complete picture I was referencing at the beginning of the video. Again, it's not the most budget cooler in the world, but $50 isn't bad for a cooler, and I really like what ENERMAX has done here. Let me know what you guys think of it down in the comments below, and come say hi to me during my live streams on Wednesdays from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern every single Wednesday, as I just said, it's on Wednesdays every single Wednesday. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Cue epic explosion. No? Okay. Maybe next time.